Oh, hi, I'm Lara, and this is tropetrinitytrilogy, and today I'm going to be discussing how I recently started listening to audiobooks on this free library app called Overdrive, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on both audiobooks and the app, so stick around to see my full review. As a kid, I was always an avid reader. However, as I got older, I got busier and busier. And also, as I got older, I moved places with internet and being online all the time, along with not really having as much time to read and keep up with the habit, I got a really short attention span. Now, for my entire life, I have always read physical books. As a kid, I always checked them out from the library, and then after discovering the internet, I became a bit of an addict buying books. But that was also the same time I got out of reading, so it's not good combination, it's bad combination. Anyway, though, with an exception of several free ebooks I have been sent, I have only read physical books, and I've never tried audiobooks. But thinking back on it, I really could have been listening to audiobooks, but my real main concern was I was worried I wouldn't be able to follow along with what the heck was going on. I thought I'd be confused, and that generally I wouldn't take in as much of the story. However, recently I have moved, as you can tell, and I drive a lot for my job. And I like listening to music, but sometimes I get tired of it. And for especially long drives, the music doesn't last as long. So I decided to give audiobooks a shot. However, I really don't want to spend money on something virtual, but apparently I don't have to, because there are free library apps that let you check out audiobooks, which I just jumped on, and I've been checking out library books in Audible form. I have not checked out any ebooks because I don't want to be reading on my phone. Again, if I can read it on my phone, I can read a physical book, and I'll just stick with the physical book. But anyway, this app I've started using is Overdrive. It's free to download, and it connects to your library. All I had to do was put in the library that is my address, and then put in my library card, and boom, I have access to all their ebooks and audiobooks. However, I've only used the audiobooks because, again, if I can hold my phone, actually look at it and read stuff on this tiny screen, I can also pick up a book and just read it in front of me and not make myself go blind. And really, I don't have as much time to be reading ebooks, but I do have tons of time to listen to books. So the different things that Overdrive is compatible with is Android, Chromebooks, e-readers, iOS, which is iPhone/iPad, iPod, Kindle e-readers along with Kindle Fire tablets, Kobo Mac, MP3 player, Nook, and Windows. So that's a lot of different devices, and you probably have one that will work. I will add that when I first downloaded the app, I had to keep re-entering my library and library card almost every single time, which got frustrating. However, more recently, I haven't had that issue, and I haven't had to re-enter it in a long time, which is good. But just in case, I keep my library card in my wallet on my phone now, so I can always add it in, and I'm not stuck in a bind where I want to get something, but I can't. Also, I will add, you need to have internet access to get the books onto your phone, but your phone downloads the entire story, so when I'm in different locations where I don't have access to the internet, it doesn't matter because the story's actually in my phone. I can listen to it without using any internet data, which is very important because a lot of times I'm listening to it in places where I don't know if there'll be internet, or I know there isn't any. Also, I will add, I haven't added in the library for my new address. However, apparently once I add it in, I can have access to both libraries no matter where I am. And this app can pretty much give you access to as many libraries as you have cards for at a time, which is awesome. So I definitely am gonna jump on that, and I'll probably move after this, but I'm just gonna keep using the app for every single place I ever live, and it'll be great unless they catch on at some point. But shh, let's hope not. For all these libraries, you have the option to check out a book for 7 days, 14 days, or 21 days. And if you check it out for only 7 days, you can have the option to renew it for more. However, if you get the max time, you can't renew it once the time runs out. And the moment the book is due, it will automatically be removed from your phone, so you can't squeak by and get a little bit more if you can. However, I have heard if you put your phone onto airplane mode, my phone won't let me do that if it's locked out. But if you put it onto airplane mode, I heard that it cannot take it off your phone, and you can listen to it for a bit more, finish it up, then take it off airplane mode, and boom, it's gone. And since the app automatically takes the book from your phone, you will never have late fees. However, despite you being able to be as part of as many libraries as you want, there are account limits. Now, I'm not sure if they're specific to my library or not, so I'm just going to tell you mine as an example. So for my library, I can have 10 checked out books at a time, and I currently have 2 audiobooks checked out, and audiobooks and ebooks both count in the same category, so it's not like you can get 10 audio, 10 they're both the same category. I can also have 10 books on hold at a time, and I am only able to renew a book that I'm reading up to 3 days before it's due. So if I want to renew it but it's 4 days until it's due, I have to wait another day before I can actually put in the process. And I can also at any time return a book early. Also, I can recommend 5 books to the library every 7 days, which is awesome because I noticed there were a couple books I was interested in checking out, but they only had like the first book in audiobook for this series, or like the second, and they didn't have the first, which is weird. So there's a couple books I'm gonna end up trying to request to see if they can get audiobook versions of them, because ideally I'd want to listen to the whole thing. Also, I will add another thing that's a bit frustrating is that on October 17th, I put A Reaper at the Gates by Sabah Tahir on reserve. And when I did that, it said that it would be about 2 weeks until I get the book. And I was also the first person and only person on the list for this book. However, it is now November 6th, and it still says about 2 weeks. However, by tomorrow, it will be 3 full weeks since I first put this book on reserve. So a full week more. So I don't know if the person who checked it out before me just renewed it one more time, which would be fine because there is a chance they did that, but still I don't know why it says 2 more weeks because it should just say 1, because at most I should be waiting 3 weeks. So hopefully I get the book tomorrow or soon thereafter. Also, I will add, at one point I was listening to a book and I had 40 minutes left, but I ran out of time and it was just immediately taken from my phone. However, since it wasn't checked out by anyone else, I immediately just re-download the whole thing, which was a bit annoying because I had to re-download every single chunk of it and not just the very end. But no big deal. I just checked it out. Oh my god, what was that? I had a freaking heart attack. But I just checked it out again, no big deal. Got immediately back, finished it up, and boom. So my conclusion on Overdrive is I think it's a great app and I definitely recommend it if you're interested in audiobooks. Also, apparently there is a newer version of the app called Libby, which is not able to be used on as many devices, but I think it's meant to be more simple. You just flip up on your phone and done. Whereas Overdrive is the more thorough one that can be used on a lot of different things. So if anyone's interested, maybe I'll check out that app and give you my opinion. However, I doubt anyone's even interested in this video, so it's a moot point. So let's get to audiobooks. What do I think of them? Despite my initial reservations, I now listen to audiobooks all the time, while driving, while cooking, while cleaning, and sometimes while working where I'm doing a task that doesn't require me to think. In fact, here's a video of my morning routine. So I have it set up on my dashboard when I drive. I just go to the Overdrive app, which is a library app, so I can listen for free. and I just click it and it starts playing on my radio.
An Ember in the Ashes.
So I can listen to my books with surround sound. Now, initially I was using it because I wanted to try them out. However, I think it's safe to say I enjoy audiobooks. My initial concern with audiobooks was I was worried I would retain less information, which would result in me A, being more confused about what's going on, and B, make my reviews and analyses of these books be less reliable and accurate because I didn't actually know what was going on, and it was fault of me not being able to retain the information when I get it in an audio form versus looking at it and reading it, because I am much more of a visual learner. And I was worried that I would end up disliking books I would have potentially loved if I had actually read them. And I didn't want to end up missing out on books or having worse experiences because of the format. Because of these concerns, I decided to start with 2 books I had actually already read, and then there's the 4th book coming out December 1st this year, and I still need to read the 3rd. So I decided to check out the first audiobook in the series, and I listened to it all the way through. So the books I listened to were An Ember in the Ashes and A Torch Against the Night, both by Sabaa Tahir. And initially I was going to listen to the 3rd book I haven't read yet as my 3rd choice, which would be A Reaper at the Gates by Sabaa Tahir, but it was not available. That's the one I'm still waiting for. So instead, I ended up checking out Zenith by Sasha Alsberg and Lindsay Cummings, which Sasha is a booktuber, and I've wanted to review that because I'm trying to review authortuber and booktuber books, even though it's way late and no one cares about my opinion anymore. Or really did. They just would have watched mine because it was the first one, not because they personally care about my opinion, but I digress. And now I'm listening to the sequel in the duology Nexus by Sasha Alsberg and Lindsay Cummings, both of which are first-time reads, or listens to, whatever. So was my prediction right? Yes and no. I do think I don't retain the names of characters and locations in the story as well. However, when it comes to the events, actions, and feelings of characters, the effect is exactly the same as reading the book, or as close to exact as possible. However, I don't think this negatively affects my enjoyment of the book or even my ability to analyze it. Can't speak. Or even my ability to analyze it. In fact, I actually think if anything, I enjoy books more listening to them than reading them. Sort of. So reading An Ember in the Ashes, I initially gave it 5 stars because I really liked the book. Now, it wasn't perfect, but it was a 5-star book in my opinion. No book is perfect. And listening to it, I felt exactly the same way. So it didn't affect it. A great book is a great book whether I read it or listen to it. However, when I initially read A Torch Against the Night, I bumped it down a star because when I was reading it, I didn't have as much time to go all the way through. I was in school, I was busy, so I was reading it very much in chunks, on and off, over the course of several months. There were giant gaps between reading it. So I ended up, and since the book was about characters journeying over a landscape, I was like, wow, this journey has a bunch of gaps where they're not really doing anything and it's just skipped over. That sucks. And then I was like, no, wait. That's because of how I read it. That's because I have the gaps. Because listening to it, I listened to it all the way through because I don't need free time really to listen to the book. I drive a lot, so I have plenty of time to get it done. And I realized, no, there were no gaps in this book. It's good. It was how I read it. So it's not necessarily that listening to it made it more fun as much as listening to it all the way through as opposed to reading it in really short with giant gaps in between made it better and gave me a better representation of what actually was happening in the book as opposed to my reading process. So I ended up giving A Torch Against the Night 5 stars after re-listening to it. So if anything, the audiobook made my review more accurate, and it wasn't because it was in audio form as much as I listened to it all the way through. So if it actually improved my ability to understand the book. So that's really more on me than the medium. However, the medium of audiobooks allow me to listen to it a lot more often I have a lot more time so I can listen to something than when I can read something, and I definitely recommend it for busy people. Now let's talk about Zenith, the book I hadn't read before listening to it. So I've seen a lot of reviews for this book where people say they're confused a lot because of all the point of views, but I never felt that way this entire time. Maybe it was partially because each person had a different voice actor, but I don't think that's the case. I've never been confused in books with different point of views when they literally say the point of view at the beginning of each chapter. So I think I'm just not easily confused by different point of views per chapter if they tell me at the beginning of the chapter, because I never forget who it was, like I'm reading it. So I don't think the audiobook actually made me more confused. I will say though that the POV changes mid-chapter that I don't think were intentional were extra confusing when the narrator was a specific voice. But I think that's the fault of the book and not the audiobook format. Because like, if you're gonna label a chapter as being for a certain character, you shouldn't switch mid-chapter. Either you can switch mid-chapter but don't label the chapters, or you don't. Like, what? However, despite me not being confused about who's telling each scene or what's going on in each scene, I do retain less information. Now, again, I retain the events, I retain the emotions, everything going on. What I don't retain is the names of things. Like, not really good at all. There is a lot of different planets in this book, however, there really aren't that many characters. Still, I couldn't remember the names of a lot of things and people. I noticed that while listening, I don't really learn the actual names as much as I learn what the names vaguely sound like. So I'm not really confused about who's talking, it's just I can't articulate who they are to anyone else, because I'm like, they're the one whose name sounds like Narugara. Best description. Or like, there'll be a scene, like, for example, in this book, there's a character, Nor, who really only interacts with two other characters. One who has a short name, one who has a long name. And the short name, if I was reading it, I would learn that after reading it once. I would read the name once, know it. And I know it now. It's Zahn. It's the easiest name ever. There's no other characters with a name similar to him. There's no other character introduced at the same time as him. There's really only 3 characters ever in the scene together, and one of them's the POV character. I only ever really struggle learning characters' names when there's a lot at once if I'm visually reading. So I know if I was reading this, I would know his name. One read, done. Once I read it once, I got it. But listening to it, it took me multiple chapters to finally figure out what his name was, because I would hear it and then I would forget. And the other character is essentially Nor's uncle, and I don't remember his name. I know it like right after it's said, but after a few minutes I forget it. I cannot retain audible information. I need to visually read it to remember names of things and places. And this is true for my whole life. I remember in high school in history class, I would learn the entire thing, go home, reiterate the whole thing to my parents by wincing a single name or date because I just forgot them all. And with audiobooks, it appears to be the same. I've learned a fair chunk of characters' names, but I still can't remember her uncle's name because it's not simple enough for my brain to remember it. I think it begins with an N and it's long. That's all I know. Also, I will add, when listening to An Ember in the Ashes, there were times where I wasn't sure if the character was speaking or thinking. I think that's one of those things where you can't see the dialogue tags. So sometimes I know when I personally write, I don't put the dialogue tag. I just put a character doing action, and then I put what they would have said. And now I'm wondering if my books would be easy to listen to or if they'd be really confusing, because it's almost like you have to always tell me that they're saying something, or I'm not going to be 100% sure if they actually are. So despite me finding audiobooks fun and not being confused with the ones I've listened to so far, I am a bit concerned about listening to audiobooks when it comes to thicker, more complex reads, specifically adult fantasy or sci-fi. I'm a bit more concerned about those. And while the audiobook didn't affect my opinion on An Ember in the Ashes, and when it comes to A Torch Against the Night, it really only affected the fact that I read it straight through. I do think it has made me like Zenith more. And part of that is that as I've gotten, when I was younger, I pretty much liked every single book I read, unless it was A, boring, or B, misleading in a certain way. So I remember Throne of Glass I didn't particularly like because I thought it'd be about a hardcore assassin who just escaped a death camp fighting to survive in a tournament, but really it was about how relatable she was. And then another book that I read that I absolutely hated was The Interrogation of, I don't remember her name, but I'll put an image up. I thought it would be a dark book about torture and interrogation, but it's literally just this girl thinking of her memories, and the memories are written in like fanfic, cutesy magic way. Like, it really isn't dark at all. It's very fluffy read, but based on the cover and the title, you wouldn't guess that at all. So unless a book's misleading or boring, I would have liked it. And I feel like with audiobooks, it's the same thing again. I had very realistic expectations for Zenith. I saw some of the negative reviews, so I listened to it and I knew what I was getting into, and I had tons of fun listening to it. Like, I was picking out tons of flaws, but I was having fun because I knew that this book wasn't going to be dark and serious and edgy with great world building. I knew it was a campy space opera and characters. Listen to it, I'm having tons of fun. And I'm not sure if that would be the case if I was reading it though. However, since I got older, I'm a lot more picky with the books I read. I'm a lot more critical, so I don't like them as much. However, with the audiobook, it's almost like I'm back to being a kid again. Audiobooks are a lot more passive. You don't have to visually look at it, you're just listening to it. It required me to be less, doing less to engage in the work of fiction. It makes it back to when I was a kid, and I just enjoy everything that's not boring or misleading. And when it comes to Zenith, I see tons of flaws in it, and I think that maybe those flaws would make me enjoy the book less, or if I was physically reading it. But in reality, I'm having tons of fun. I knew the book was flawed. Listening to it, it's flawed like I knew it would be, but it's fun. And I'm not sure if I read the book, if I would be having as much fun as I am, especially if I didn't have time to read it all the way through and had to pick it up, put it down. This book, I don't think would be engaging enough to get me to keep reading it if it was a physical copy, but since I'm listening to it and listening is more passive, I just turn it on while driving, I am enjoying it much more, and I'm more motivated to keep going since I don't have to put in as much effort to continue. So I do think overall, audiobooks will make me like books more, which in some ways as a reader is good, but as a reviewer, I have to be careful to make sure I give books I physically read a fair review compared to audiobooks, and also don't let the easiness of audiobooks prevent me from being critical. Now, I am being very critical of Zenith. I have tons of notes on the book, but I'm not sure if I'm going to be as good at commenting on whether or not the book kept me reading because of the format being so much easier. I can review the audiobook though and say, I think it was well done. The voice actors did a good job. Also, I will add, if I was reading a book for the amount of time I spend listening to them, I would have read a lot more, because audiobooks are generally slower because they have to enunciate everything so you can understand it, whereas reading, it's a lot quicker. So I will say I've been actively consuming books a lot more than I have been, and pretty much to the rate as I was when I was a kid, consuming them at the same amounts, taking up the same amount of time, engaged in fiction. However, I am not finishing books as quickly as I did as a kid because audiobooks take way longer to finish. But yeah, my opinion on audiobooks are super fun. I definitely recommend you give them a try because I really enjoy them. I think they're great. And if you're not reviewing books, there's really no downsides to them unless you have trouble retaining stuff. And in that case, you might have to be more picky with which books you listen to. Like, I wouldn't listen to books that have cool, formatting structures like Illuminate or something like that. I would want to read it to appreciate it. or I wouldn't want to read something I know is going to be really dense and complex, I'm going to try to listen to something like that in audiobook form one day, but I wouldn't recommend it starting out. But yeah, I'm listening to books as much as I used to read as a kid, so I definitely recommend it. It's great, it's fun, 10 out of 10. And overall, that's my thought on Overdrive and audiobooks. They're both great. I highly recommend them. And I already have reviews of An Ember in the Ashes and A Torch Against the Night on my channel, and I will link them below if you want to check them out. And I will be reviewing Zenith pretty soon, and also Nexus once I finish that one, so be on the lookout for those books. Please tell me your opinion on Overdrive or audiobooks, whether you think audiobooks change your experience reading or if it's about the same for you. Also, let me know your thoughts on all the books I mentioned that I have listened to. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.